April 26, 1478, Florence Cathedral, High Mass. At the front of the packed church stand the two most powerful men in the city, Lorenzo de Medici and his younger brother, Giuliano. At the most sacred moment of the service, the men standing next to them pull out daggers. Giuliano is stabbed 19 times. He bleeds out on the cathedral floor. Lorenzo, slashed across the neck, vaults over the choir rail and barricades himself in the sacristy. Two of the assassins were priests. In on the plot, a rival banking family, an archbishop, and, with his blessing behind the scenes, the Pope himself. Think about what that means. Removing one family of bankers took a conspiracy that reached the Vatican. How does a family get that powerful? Not with an army, not with a crown, with ledgers. This is the story of the Medici, the family that built modern banking, bought the papacy, put two queens on the throne of France, and bankrolled the Renaissance as a side effect. To understand the Medici, you have to understand the problem every European banker faced in the Middle Ages. Lending money at interest was a mortal sin. Not frowned upon, not regulated. A sin. The church called it usury, and it could get you excommunicated. Dante put usurers in the seventh circle of hell, sharing real estate with murderers. Now, the Medici did not invent banking. That myth needs to go first. Florence had been Europe's financial capital for a century before them, and its giants, the Bardi and Pazzi families, ran bigger operations than the Medici ever would. Then, both collapsed in the 1340s because they lent a fortune to the King of England and he simply did not pay it back. Remember that lesson because it's the first and last lesson of this story. Kings do not pay. In 1397, into the wreckage of that world, a quiet, careful man named Giovanni de Medici moved his small bank from Rome to Florence. He had two things, a workaround for the sin and an eye for the right client. The workaround was called the Bill of Exchange. A merchant pays money into a Medici branch in Florence and receives a piece of paper. He cashes that paper at a Medici branch in Bruges or London in local currency. No loan, no interest, just currency exchange. Except the exchange rate was set when the paper was issued, not when it was cashed, and buried inside that rate was the banker's profit. Interest existed, it just never appeared anywhere on the page. It was regulatory arbitrage. The regulator was God. Then Giovanni built the structure. The Medici Bank was not one company. Each branch was its own partnership, with its own books, audited every year, with Florence holding the controlling stake. That is, in everything but name, the holding company, 500 years early. If one branch failed, it failed alone. The Bardi and Pazzi had been a single ship with one hull. Giovanni built a fleet. And the client? Giovanni had spent years backing an ambitious Neapolitan who clawed his way up to become Pope John the 23rd. History later demoted him to anti-pope. The deposits were real either way. The Medici became the bankers of the papacy, with church revenue from all over Europe to move, change, and hold. Raymond de Rouver, the historian who reconstructed the bank's account books, found that between 1420 and 1435, the Rome branch alone produced 62% of the bank's entire profits. The Medici were not a bank with an important client. They were God's cashiers, with a banking business on the side. If the idea that modern banking was built on a loophole around sin just changed how you see finance, subscribe. This channel covers the people and institutions that built the financial world we live in, and there's a lot more to come. Because Giovanni's son was about to point this machine at something bigger than money. Cosimo de Medici inherited the bank in 1429 and understood something his rivals did not. In a republic, you do not need to hold office. You need to hold the debts of the men who do. Florence's old families noticed. In 1433, they had Cosimo arrested and exiled. It lasted 1 year. The problem with exiling your city's banker is that the money leaves with him. By 1434, Florence invited him back. His enemies got exile instead, and for 30 years, Cosimo ran the city without holding office. The uncrowned king of Florence. And then there was the spending. Lorenzo later calculated from the family records that between 1434 and 1471, the Medici spent 663,755 gold florins on buildings, charities, and taxes. A skilled Florentine craftsman earned maybe 50 florins a year. That is roughly 13,000 years of his wages. Lorenzo's written verdict? Money well spent. And he was right. Every church Cosimo rebuilt, every Donatello he commissioned, was doing a job, converting florins into legitimacy, for a family whose trade was officially a sin. The Renaissance was many things. One of them was the greatest reputation management campaign in history. Modern billionaires put their names on stadiums. The Medici did it first, and they did it with Botticelli. By Lorenzo's time, a teenage sculptor was living in the household eating at the family table. His name was Michelangelo. Imagine your intern turning out to be Michelangelo. But power that visible attracts knives. The Pazzi were an older, nobler Florentine banking family, and they had watched the Medici take everything. The city, the papal account, the future. In Pope Sixtus IV, they found an ally who wanted the Medici gone. The Pope chose his words carefully. He wanted a change of regime in Florence, but without killing. The men he blessed understood what was actually being asked. The plan was to kill both brothers at Mass, where they would be unguarded. Half of it worked. Giuliano died on the floor of the Duomo. Lorenzo survived. What followed was not justice in any modern sense. Florence rose for the Medici. The Archbishop of Pisa was hanged from a window of the government palace in his full robes. Around 80 people were executed. The conspiracy meant to end the Medici instead proved that Florence would kill for them. Lorenzo came out stronger. He was not yet 30. The family had survived the daggers. What it would not survive was the thing nobody was watching: the books. While Lorenzo became the most admired man in Italy, the machine paying for it all was rotting. Lorenzo was a statesman and a poet, and by his own admission, no banker. Oversight slipped. The London branch lent heavily to King Edward IV and lost over 51,000 florins. The Bruges branch lent to Charles the Bold and lost roughly 70,000 more. Branch after branch closed. The first lesson of this story has come back around, right on schedule. Kings do not pay. In 1494, 2 years after Lorenzo's death, a French army marched into Italy. The Medici were chased out of Florence, and the bank was dissolved. Gone. And here's the twist that makes the Medici the Medici. It did not matter. For 3 generations, the family had been running a quiet conversion. Florins in, legitimacy out. The returns arrived after the bank was already dead. In 1513, Lorenzo's son became Pope Leo X. His cousin followed as Pope Clement VII. And to fund projects like St. Peter's Basilica, Leo's church leaned hard on selling indulgences, documents that reduced your punishment for sin, for cash. A German monk named Martin Luther found this outrageous enough to write down 95 objections in 1517. The family whose fortune began with a loophole around sin helped trigger the Reformation over the pricing of sin. History does not usually write its ironies this cleanly. The conversion kept paying. Catherine de' Medici became Queen of France in 1547 and effectively ran the country for decades. Marie de' Medici followed a half-century later. And in Florence, the family dropped the act entirely. Hereditary dukes from 1532, Grand Dukes of Tuscany from 1569, ruling for another 200 years. The bank lasted 97 years. The dynasty lasted 340. A sin turned into a spread. A loophole turned into a bank turned into a city turned into popes, queens, and a crown. The Medici understood something every fortune since has had to relearn. Money is at its most powerful at the exact moment you convert it into something money cannot officially buy. The Vanderbilts, who we covered in another video, converted their fortune into marble houses and lost it all in 50 years. The Medici converted theirs into institutions, and it carried them for 3 centuries. One more detail. In 1743, the last of the Medici line, Anna Maria Luisa, died with no heirs. She willed the family's entire art collection, 3 centuries of Botticelli's and Michelangelo's, to the city of Florence on one condition: none of it could ever leave. The bank is gone, the popes are gone, the queens and the crowns are gone. The art is still exactly where she left it, and the whole world travels to Florence to stand in front of it. That was the best trade the Medici ever made.